This is Jordan Pobletti with DisneyExaminer. Hi, Mark and Vanessa.
Hey, Jordan.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. So just got off another interview with your producer, Roy. Want to talk more about kind of like the camera techniques that were very specific to Tiger in this one. He'd mentioned because of the nature of tigers and connecting with human beings, you guys had to use some long distance lenses and different types of cameras. And so could you speak a little bit more to that, and how close were you able to actually get to the tigers?
I think the answer to that question depends on whether we were there or whether we weren't there, and I'll explain what that means. One of the techniques Roy's talking about is remote cameras. So we could place cameras in places we knew tigers were going to go, maybe waterholes or stream beds or the den, and we could operate those cameras from hundreds of meters away. And so we were actually quite far away from those shots, but those shots feel really close. And also, they feel very natural in the sense that the tigers have no idea they're being watched. So they do, real wild behavior. Ordinarily, if there's a person next to a tiger, you don't get completely uninhibited behavior. But these remote cameras enable us to see things that we would only see if a person wasn't there. And yet, with full camera work, because we can control these cameras with a sort of a games console and get focus, pan, tilt, everything. So that was one technique. But the other game changer for us was just when we were driving around filming tigers in the usual way, we would actually have these long telephoto lenses that could bring the tiger in really close just for their power of magnification. Now, ordinarily, those lenses are very wobbly because the magnification also amplifies any bumps in the road or any wobbles from the cameraman's arm. But these cameras are now gyro stabilized to such a degree that we can actually drive along and track with the tigers as they're walking. And the tiger could be 70 meters away, but it's a close-up and it's tracking like a Hollywood action shot, going wiping past trees and vegetation. And it feels very cinematic. But both of these techniques are, really quite new. And when Disney first asked us to make a tiger show 11 years ago, and we declined because we said it would be too difficult, neither of those bits of equipment were available then. If they had, we might have said yes, although there were other factors then which weren't in place, like the perfect tigers in the perfect location. And so we had to wait for all of these things to come together, all of the stars to align, the perfect storm of equipment, tigers, assistance from Indians on the ground. Everything had to align to make this film possible because tigers are really hard.
Right. Yeah, that's fascinating. That's what Roy mentioned also. Yeah, a lot of things needed to kind of come together in order for it to actually happen this time around. Mark, I know this isn't your first time doing Disney nature films, but Vanessa, you've also kind of worked in nature documentaries too before. And so how was it working with the Disney nature veteran Mark, and what were you able to contribute as
Vanessa
a co-director?
did work with me on Elephant.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're actually married, so we've worked together for about 30 years, and on different projects. But you're right, we joined the kind of Disney nature journey with Elephant when we moved to Africa together to make a film with our family actually on elephants. But yeah, it was really fun because Mark and I have we have overlapping but slightly different skill sets. So whilst I sort of might lead on the music side and the scoring, Mark leads more on the visual direction. But we kind of we bounce, we're sort of sounding boards for each other. So it's very much a collaborative effort.
So cool. I'm sure there are complexities in being married and working as creative collaborators, but we will not get into that.
We will not get into
Um, well, I kind of want to land on, I think, what would probably be the longer question and maybe a longer answer. But Roy also touched about conservation, and the accompanying film "Tigers on the Rise," I think, was not done by you guys, but a colleague. How how did that kind of film come together? Because it's not every. I mean, I know previous Disney nature films had accompanying pieces with it, but not a full length
Yeah.
additional film. And so I'm kind of curious where that came about. And as you guys see, your films now affecting a generation, right? Because Disney Nature has been around for the better part of 10 years now.
Yeah.
What have you guys seen insofar as films either making new generations of conservationists, and the direct impact that you guys have with making these and turning them into people who want to advocate and save tigers and other animals?
Shall I start with the behind the scenes?
Start with the behind the scenes, yeah.
So we've made the companion shows in the past, and the one on elephant, for example, is a good example of how they used to be, which is very much, you know, filmed alongside. So it was how we made it, what the experience for the crew was like, and lots of adventure, not too serious, just sort of pure entertainment. But with Tiger, right from the start, we thought this is actually, it's really boring watching people film tigers because they're big cats and they sleep most of the time. But B, this was a really great chance to do something a bit more substantial and significant, because there's an amazing conservation story, which I'm sure Roy will have touched on, that, you know, at this very bleak time when we're all very worried about climate change, there are great examples where people have taken conservation of their own animals into their own hands. And India is an amazing example. So just in 2008, there were only 1,500. 2006, there were 1,500 tigers. Just 20 years later, there are over 3,500. And that is solely been done by Indian people who have been committed at every level to saving them. And that's something that we thought that's a really great subject for the companion doc. So our co-director, actually, Mark's co-director on the main show, Rob, would help set up some of the pure natural history sequences, but he's also a very skilled people director. So after he'd done those sequences, he would go off and film, because that story was happening outside the forest parks, because the main tigers are behaving inside forest reserves, but where the Tigers on the Rise story is in the villages and the bufferlands and these places where tigers are having to go to because the parks can no longer hold them anymore. So we couldn't shoot them, we shot them in parallel, but not in the same places.
Got it.
I think what's interesting is the films have two very different roles. The second film that Vanessa has been talking about shows what happens when tigers move into human habitat, villages and the like, and what that conflict looks like. And it's very modern and it's very current, and the way that the Indians deal with it is very different from how we would deal with it. You know, the way they've managed to sort of live alongside tigers rather than just exterminate them is, which would probably happen in America or the UK if all those people were eaten. That's amazing, and that's a conservation story in itself. But then, of course, the main film is really, I think, a film of hope, because it shows you this wonderful forest which is still there and it's full of tigers, and it's a sort of an example of what's still there to save. There's just so much bad news now about conservation that it's sort of easy for people just to give up, particularly when the conservation story of the day is climate change, and people feel, I think, quite powerless. You know, think, will it really make a difference if I change my car, if I change my boiler, if I insulate my house? Just look at the rest of the world. They feel quite powerless. And I think it just shows that actually all of these stories now that are sort of local, you can help save tigers in the way that Indians have. They've just stopped poaching, they've stopped deforestation, and that's saved the tiger. And most of these animals in the world that are endangered will actually die of something other than climate change.
Exactly.
Long before climate change gets them.
Yeah.
So we should maybe for the moment kind of focus on trying to stop overfishing, stop poaching, stop deforestation, which are things we can manage. Climate change, of course, is crucially important, but we don't want it to be that by the time we sorted the climate, everything else is dead anyway.
Right.
You know? So I think there are sort of two very big threats. There's the sort of medium-term threat of climate change, critical though it is, but we've got to look after the other things because we have the tools to look after those things right now. Climate change is, maybe in the future there'll be fusion power will be saved by something that doesn't involve everybody changing their lifestyles. Let's hope. But in the meantime, we've got to make sure that where we have tools to protect things like these animals that we do, and the Indians have shown us the way.
And I think the other thing that Disneynature does is, you know, just as we were inspired to become wildlife filmmakers, we're now able to communicate to mass family audiences and hopefully get that next generation of kids going,
Absolutely.
"Oh, that looks fun. They look amazing. Maybe I could get involved in studying animals, conserving animals, filming animals, and understanding the environment." So I think it's very much a kind of moment of handing on the baton. Certainly we feel we've been doing it for 30 years.
And we were inspired to make films by watching TV programs when we were young, you know, and so the idea that we could maybe inspire some youngsters to do the same would be great.
That's awesome.
I don't want to just inspire youngsters to make TV programs, I should say. I want to inspire youngsters to go out and do proper conservation work.
Yeah. Well, I think you guys have done that so much already. And so thank you again for making this beautiful film. And it's an honor to talk to you both today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
Take
so
care.
much.
Like this video and subscribe to Disney Examiner, where we take a closer look at all things Disney.